I sacrificed my freedom for a promise, but did that promise ever mean anything? The day the keys to my sailboat clinked into the hand of the new owner, I felt the sharp, cold snap of my life's most profound tether breaking. I'm Alex, 30, and in that single transaction, I traded the limitless expanse of the ocean and the wild heartbeat of my freedom for a single, fragile promise. Years later, staring at the dusty horizon of the landlocked city I hate, the only thing that haunts me is the cold realization that the promise I sacrificed everything for never meant anything at all. Before the concrete swallowed me whole, I was a creature of the sea. My home was the Wanderer, a 36-foot catch, and my job as a freelance marine conservationist kept me perpetually moving, charting coastal health from the Aegean to the Caribbean. My life was defined by salt air, unpredictable weather, and the utter lack of a fixed address. It was hard, glorious, and perfectly mine. I carried everything I needed in one bag, and my most important scheduled event was the tide. Then I met Seraphina, 29. She was working on a temporary corporate consulting contract in a coastal city where I anchored for repairs. She was the absolute antithesis of my life, structured, high-powered, and impeccably organized. She smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. I was drawn to her stability, she was drawn to my chaos. We fell into a fierce, passionate relationship defined by countdowns, the time before my next deployment, the time before her next merger. As the commitment deepened, the conflict sharpened. Seraphina adored the idea of my life, the stories, the sunsets, the freedom, but she hated the reality of it. She hated the unreliable Wi-Fi, the constant risk, the gnawing anxiety of not knowing where I was. She was an architect of the future, and my life was built on moment-to-moment improvisation. The inevitable conversation came one humid evening as I was preparing for a new, year-long contract mapping currents in the South Pacific. She looked at me, her eyes brimming not with tears, but with a quiet, steely determination. She didn't ask me to abandon my work, not exactly. She asked me to anchor. She presented me with the dream, selling the Wanderer, buying a small, stable property in a coastal town near her firm's headquarters, and settling down to start a family within 3 years. She said she couldn't build a future on a boat that was always sailing away. She needed me to choose her over the horizon. She spoke of our life together, simple, domestic bliss, shared weekends, and the eventual arrival of children who would know the stability of a front yard and a reliable father. She promised me that once we were grounded, she would learn to love the stillness, and together, we would build a life far deeper and more meaningful than the surface-level excitement of my travels. She promised that my passion would be channeled, not extinguished, into teaching and local conservation. The pressure was immense. My desire for her, for a stable, fixed point in my perpetually shifting world, was intoxicating. The thought of a child who knew their father would always be there was the final, devastating weight. I told myself that freedom was a boy's dream, and stability was a man's reality. The sacrifice was immediate and total. I spent the next 2 months gutting my life. I sold the Wanderer to a family in Panama, feeling a literal ache in my chest as I handed over the paperwork. I cashed out my conservation contracts, ending my career as a freelance sailor. I bought a small, sturdy house, a practical, ugly, square box with a tiny yard, in the very heart of the landlocked city Seraphina had demanded for its professional opportunities. It was everything the sea was not: fixed, predictable, and suffocatingly dry. Seraphina was radiant, her relief was palpable. She called me her rock, her foundation, the man who finally chose her future over his own self-interest. My sacrifice, raw and painful as it was, bought me a year of intoxicating happiness defined by a profound sense of shared purpose. But that purpose began to fray almost immediately. I fulfilled my end of the bargain with meticulous, grinding effort. I found a safe, reliable job in local government environmental assessment, a life of predictable spreadsheets and mandatory office hours. I renovated the house, turning the practical box into a beautiful, secure home. I was present, reliable, and utterly devoted. Seraphina, however, didn't anchor. Her career was ascendant. Her promised slowing down never happened. She worked longer hours, traveled more frequently, and her attention became increasingly fractured. Our shared evenings, meant to be filled with discussions of the dream, were consumed by her conference calls and jet lag. The renovations I worked on were praised, not as our shared project, but as evidence of my dependability, a nice feature of her life. The promised discussion about children, the key weight of my sacrifice, was perpetually delayed. We need to hit this merger target first, Alex. Let's reassess next quarter. Next quarter became the next year, always pushed back by the relentless demands of her career. I was living a life I hated, a life of stifling routine and dry air, powered solely by the vision of the dream she had painted, a vision she seemed to be forgetting. The isolation was crushing. I had no deep connection in this city. My old friends, sailors and wanderers all, couldn't understand my decision. They would send me photos of blue water and foreign ports, and my replies became short, hollow excuses. I was trapped by my own honor. I had made the commitment, and I wouldn't be the man to break it. I started taking long, solitary drives on weekends, driving out to the nearest body of water, a murky reservoir miles away, just to stare at the surface and feel a shadow of the life I lost. My hands, once skilled in splicing rope and navigating stars, now only dealt with keyboards and power tools. The low-grade resentment became constant. I was sacrificing my soul every day for a future that Seraphina was actively postponing, seemingly enjoying the security of my presence without having to pay the emotional price of settling down herself. My stability had simply enabled her ambition to grow unchecked. How do you approach the partner you gave up everything for, when you realize they are using your sacrifice as a stepping stone to a life that no longer includes the original promise? Do you demand the commitment you earned, or quietly accept that you misunderstood the terms of the deal? I finally attempted the conversation, not with anger, but with the quiet desperation of a man who needed his entire existence justified. I reminded her of the 3-year timeline, the sale of the Wanderer, the move to this city. Seraphina's response was a revelation of her true priorities. She didn't offer a timeline, she offered a managerial assessment. She acknowledged my efforts, the house was perfect, my job was stable, but stated that her career trajectory now required a different level of focus. She implied that my insistence on the dream was small-minded in the face of her potential success. She never once apologized for the delay or the shift in our plans. My sacrifice was simply an investment she had decided to delay the payout on. The full, devastating realization came 2 months later, 4 years after I sold my boat. She was away on a month-long consulting trip to London, leaving me alone in the sterile perfection of the home I hated. I was cleaning out an old desk drawer she rarely used when I found a pristine leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a journal, it was a 5-year career plan. I felt a cold dread as I opened it. It was meticulous, charting her mergers, her promotions, and her projected income. The final entry, labeled, Year 5, Full Partner, included a brief, clinical bullet point under the subheading, Domestic Adjustment. The note read, by Year 5, assess the value of current stability. If income targets met, transition to a partner with aligned status network e.g., senior counsel at the firm. Current arrangement Alex can be smoothly transitioned to co-parenting role, minimizing disruption, but current structure is insufficient for required social elevation. The air left my lungs. The 3 years, the house, the stability, the family promise, it was all a temporary holding pattern, a strategic move to insulate her from drama while she executed the early, high-risk phases of her career. I was not her husband, I was the current arrangement. My sacrifice of my life and my passion was not for a shared future, but for a 4-year human security blanket. She had never planned to settle down, she only planned to settle me. The crushing betrayal wasn't about the affair she didn't have, it was about the emotional affair she had with her own ambition. The promise I had bought with my freedom was a lie written in a 5-year business plan. The fury I felt was cold, absolute, and quiet. I didn't smash things. I simply stopped performing. I stopped maintaining the house. I stopped making her favorite meals. I stopped waiting up. I reverted to my most basic, autonomous self. I worked, I ate, I slept. The meticulous, doting husband disappeared, replaced by a gray, present stranger. When Seraphina returned from London, she immediately noticed the lack of maintenance. The lawn was overgrown, the sink was dripping, and the polished veneer of the house was gone. She stood in the center of the kitchen, her voice sharp with annoyance at the sudden disorder. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked why I had neglected my responsibilities. I looked at her, seeing the ruthlessness of her plan reflected in her eyes, and spoke to her, not as a husband, but as the man she had terminated from her life plan. I told her I found the notebook. I recited the line, current arrangement Alex can be smoothly transitioned to co-parenting role. The look on her face was not shame, but profound frustration at being caught. She tried to deny it, then tried to justify it, claiming it was just contingency planning for her high-stakes life. She never once apologized for the lie, only for the discovery. I realized then that she was incapable of seeing my sacrifice as anything but a tool. She was a genius at transactions, but utterly bankrupt in emotional terms. I walked out that night, taking only the single bag I used to carry on the wanderer and the now empty satchel where my camera used to reside. I left her in the perfect, square house she had engineered, surrounded by the meticulous life I had built for her. I didn't ask for any assets, they were all part of her plan, not mine. The only thing I demanded was the quiet, absolute return of my identity. I'm renting a tiny apartment in a real coastal town now, the smell of salt in the air every morning a painful, necessary reminder of what I threw away. I found a job teaching sailing, a physical connection to the sea, a small, tangible way to earn back my sanity. I haven't bought another boat yet, the commitment feels too terrifying, the memory of the betrayal too fresh. My trust, the true foundation of my life, is still shattered. I sacrificed my freedom for the promise of a shared future. I endured years of emptiness, powered by that single, beautiful lie. The ultimate irony is that I have regained my freedom, but it feels hollow, scarred by the knowledge that I allowed myself to be manipulated by a person who valued me less than a line item in her quarterly report. I am free to move, but I don't know where to sail. If you had given up your entire career and life path for a promise of a family, only to find the promise was a temporary strategic lie, what would you do first? Find a new passion, or dedicate your energy to healing the lost time. I am still trying to rebuild the foundation, brick by painful brick. I am Alex, 30, a man who knows the price of an empty promise, and who is desperately trying to learn to trust the horizon again. What do you think? Was my sacrifice a display of deep love and commitment, or a fool's mistake born of naive devotion? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. If this story of the price of stability and the pain of betrayal resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to follow the next chapter of my journey.